Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring avoidant personality disorder.
Okay.
Have you heard of this one before?
I have heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think more and more people are starting to become aware of.
Yeah.
And it's actually more common than you might think,
Right.
affecting roughly 2.5% of the population.
Yeah.
And impacting men and women equally.
Interesting.
We've got some great excerpts from Very Well Mind to kind of guide us through this, and a couple other resources that we're going to be pulling from.
Right.
I have to admit, the more I was reading about AVPD, the more I realized just how much it goes beyond like simple shyness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can have a really deep impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
You know, it makes relationships challenging, even work challenging.
Yeah. So let's dive into the symptoms, because some of them are kind of what you might expect, right? Like feeling anxious in social situations or worrying about being, judged or criticized.
Right.
But some of the symptoms are a little more surprising, I thought. For example, finding yourself like constantly worrying about what others think of you, like to the point where it really interferes with your ability to like live your life.
Right.
Yeah. Imagine feeling so inadequate that even like choosing what to eat for dinner triggers anxiety.
Oh, wow.
Or turning down a promotion.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're terrified of the added responsibility and potential for criticism.
Yeah, that's a great example of how the fear goes beyond just, typical nerves.
Right.
It's this pervasive anxiety that just seeps into every corner of your life.
Yeah. And then there's this concept of anhedonia, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, anhedonia is that inability to feel pleasure.
Right.
Even from things that you usually enjoy.
Yeah.
So it's like this constant anxiety casts a shadow over everything.
It's not just avoiding parties. It's about avoiding situations where you have to make a choice.
Right.
And then potentially face judgment for it.
And that's one of the key differences between AVPD and simply being shy or introverted. It's that constant, intense fear of messing up or being judged that just permeates all aspects of life.
So speaking of which, how is AVPD actually diagnosed?
Well, doctors use the DSM-5 criteria,
Okay.
which lists a bunch of symptoms.
Yeah.
And to be diagnosed with AVPD, you need to have at least 4 of those symptoms present.
Okay, so there's this whole distinction between AVPD and social anxiety disorder,
Yes.
right? And they both kind of involve this social fear, but they seem to stem from different places.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Both involve a fear of social situations, but the root cause is different.
Okay.
With AVPD, the fear comes from this deep sense of personal inadequacy, a feeling of not being worthy of connection,
Okay.
whereas social anxiety is more about an intense in-the-moment fear of specific situations.
Right.
But AVPD is rooted in this underlying belief of not being good enough.
So it's more about how you view yourself as opposed to just a fear of the situation itself.
Exactly.
And you can actually have both, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You can experience both social anxiety and AVPD.
Someone could be dealing with both.
Yeah.
Which just shows how complex mental health can be.
Right.
And that's why a diagnosis is so important. It's not about labeling someone, but about understanding the root of their struggles,
Right.
which is the first step to finding the right help.
So now that we've got a handle on like how it's diagnosed, let's talk about what causes it.
Okay.
And the research seems to point to like a pretty complex interplay of factors.
Right. It's not usually just one thing. It's a combination of genetic predisposition, environmental influences, and early childhood experiences.
So nature and nurture kind of all mixed in together.
Exactly.
One of the things that the article mentions is this idea of behavioral inhibition.
Yes.
What is that?
So essentially, behavioral inhibition is the tendency to be shy or withdrawn as a child.
Okay.
So you might picture a child who clings to their parent's leg at a playground, hesitant to join the other kids.
Yep.
And research suggests that children who are highly inhibited are more prone to negative social experiences, which can lay the groundwork for developing AVPD later on.
So it's almost like they're kind of always on high alert, expecting rejection or criticism.
It's as if they're always on high alert, expecting rejection or criticism. Yeah.
And so then those early experiences really shape how they see themselves and how they interact with the world.
Exactly.
So how does this play out in the long run? Like, what are the potential consequences of living with untreated AVPD?
One of the most common consequences, unfortunately, is self-isolation.
Right.
Because social situations trigger so much anxiety. People with AVPD often withdraw, which can lead to a vicious cycle.
Right. It's like they're trying to protect themselves from pain, but the isolation ends up making them feel even worse.
Exactly. And this isolation can have ripple effects on work, school, and relationships.
Yeah.
You can imagine someone with AVPD avoiding team projects or passing up opportunities for advancement or struggling to form lasting connections.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right.
They fear rejection, so they avoid connection, which then makes rejection more likely.
Precisely.
Because they haven't had the chance to build those social skills and relationships.
And unfortunately, there's also an increased risk of turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse
Right.
to numb the painful feelings of inadequacy and anxiety.
So it's clear that AVPD can have like a really significant impact on a person's life.
Right.
But let's move to the more hopeful part of this discussion, which is treatment.
Okay.
The article emphasizes that a lot of people with AVPD don't seek help, but it is possible to break free from this cycle.
It is.
There are a number of effective treatment options available.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the approaches that have shown promise for AVPD?
Okay. Well, one of the most important things to understand is that you don't have to go through this alone.
Okay.
There is help available, and
So what kinds of help are we talking about here?
well, there are several types of therapy that can be really helpful.
Okay.
One common approach is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Which focuses on identifying and changing those negative thought patterns that contribute to those avoidance behaviors.
So instead of just avoiding a situation, you're learning to kind of challenge the thoughts that are driving that avoidance and develop coping strategies to navigate it more effectively.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then there's psychodynamic therapy, which dives deeper into how past experiences, especially those from childhood, might be shaping current struggles.
So it's about uncovering the root of those deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and how they might be influencing your behavior in the present.
Precisely.
Okay.
And then there's this really intriguing therapy called schema therapy,
Okay.
which I think we should dedicate some time to because it offers a really unique perspective on personality disorders.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because the article mentioned these maladaptive schemas, which just sounds kind of intense.
It sounds more complicated than it is.
Okay.
Think of schemas as deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and behaving that we develop early in life. These patterns are kind of like mental shortcuts that help us make sense of the world.
Yeah.
But sometimes those schemas can become maladaptive, meaning they're no longer helpful and can actually cause us a lot of distress.
So in the case of AVPD, a maladaptive schema might be something like, I'm not good enough,
Exactly.
or I'm going to be rejected.
Yes.
And then that schema drives all those avoidance behaviors.
Exactly. Schema therapy goes beyond just identifying these schemas. It helps individuals understand where these schemas came from, often tracing them back to unmet needs in childhood.
And this is where the concept of limited reparenting comes in.
The idea is that by addressing those unmet needs from childhood within the therapy relationship, you can start to heal those deeper emotional wounds.
So it's like getting a second chance at having those core emotional needs met.
Yeah, imagine a therapist providing the validation and emotional support you may have missed out on as a child, helping you rewire those deep-seated beliefs about yourself.
That's a really powerful concept, and it makes me wonder if addressing those unmet needs could be a key to healing a lot of different emotional struggles, not just AVPD.
That's a fascinating question, and one that researchers are exploring.
Yeah.
It highlights how our early experiences can have such a profound impact on our lives, often in ways we're not even aware of.
So we've talked about CBT, we've talked about psychodynamic therapy and schema therapy.
Right.
What about medication? Does that play a role in treating AVPD?
Medication isn't typically the first line of treatment for AVPD,
Okay.
but it can be helpful in managing some of the related symptoms like anxiety and depression.
So it's used kind of as a supplemental tool alongside therapy.
Exactly. And the good news is that with the right combination of support and treatment, people with AVPD can learn to manage their symptoms, challenge their negative beliefs, and create more fulfilling lives.
So that leads us to the question of what can someone do if they think they might be struggling with this?
Yeah.
What's the first step?
The most important first step is simply acknowledging that you might need help.
Right.
That takes a lot of courage, and it's something to be proud of.
Yeah.
Remember, there's no shame in seeking help. It's a sign of strength, not weakness.
That's such an important message. Seeking help is about taking care of yourself and investing in your well-being.
Exactly. And there are so many resources available now.
Like what?
Well, you can talk to a trusted friend or family member or find a therapist who specializes in personality disorders.
Are there online resources too?
Absolutely. Organizations like the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, ADA, and the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, have a wealth of information about AVPD, including how to find therapists and support groups.
So you don't have to face this alone.
You don't have to face this alone, no.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the symptoms and causes of AVPD to the various treatment options that are available.
Right.
But I want to kind of shift gears a bit and talk about what it actually feels like to live with this disorder.
Okay.
Because I think it's one thing to understand the clinical definition of AVPD, but it's another thing entirely to grasp like the lived experience of it.
It is.
And I think that's where empathy comes in.
Ah.
Like we need to go beyond the textbook description and try to step into the shoes of someone who's navigating the world with this constant fear and self-doubt.
I agree.
So imagine living with this constant nagging sense of inadequacy.
Yeah.
Feeling like you're not good enough, smart enough, interesting enough, or worthy of love and connection. And that underlying belief just shapes how you perceive yourself and how you interact with the world.
And it can be exhausting.
Oh, I can only imagine how exhausting that would be.
Constantly be on guard, waiting for rejection or criticism.
Yeah.
It's like having this hyperactive radar that's always scanning for signs of disapproval, even when there are none.
Yeah.
And that hypervigilance takes a toll.
So let's talk about how this plays out in everyday life.
Okay.
The article touches on, the impact of AVPD on relationships, work, social interactions, but I'd love to just kind of delve a little deeper into the emotional experience of it.
Sure. One of the most common experiences for people with AVPD is a profound sense of loneliness and isolation.
Right.
They long for connection, but their fear of rejection keeps them from reaching out, creating this painful paradox.
Yeah, and that isolation often leads to them missing out on experiences that could help them build confidence and challenge those negative beliefs about themselves.
Exactly. They might avoid social gatherings, decline invitations to go out, or turn down opportunities to try new things. And this avoidance can become so ingrained that it starts to feel like a prison of their own making.
It's a vicious cycle. The fear of rejection leads to avoidance, which reinforces the belief that they're not good enough, which then fuels further avoidance.
And it can be hard for people on the outside to understand.
Yeah.
They might see someone who's quiet or withdrawn and think they're just shy or unfriendly.
Right.
But underneath the surface is this deep well of pain and longing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges with AVPD. It's often invisible to the outside world.
Right.
People might not realize the inner turmoil that someone's experiencing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that everyone experiences AVPD differently.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all description.
It's a spectrum like most mental health conditions are.
Yeah.
But I think the key takeaway here is that AVPD is a real and debilitating disorder that deserves compassion and understanding.
I agree.
We need to move away from judgments and stereotypes and recognize the very real suffering that people with AVPD experience.
I couldn't agree more. And that understanding is the first step toward creating a more supportive and compassionate environment for those who are struggling.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Imagine the courage it takes for someone with AVPD to simply show up in the world each day,
Yeah.
knowing that they're carrying this heavy burden of fear and self-doubt.
It's a testament to their resilience and strength.
Yeah. And I think it's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to be more understanding and compassionate toward those who might be struggling,
Absolutely.
whether their struggles are visible to us or not.
I agree. Okay, so we've explored the symptoms, causes, and impact of AVPD, and we've touched on the importance of treatment and seeking help.
Right.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll continue our exploration of treatment options and delve into some of the strategies that can help individuals with AVPD cope with their symptoms and start to break free from that cycle of avoidance.
I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into avoidant personality disorder.
Okay.
If you're just joining us, we've been exploring the ins and outs of this often misunderstood condition,
Yes.
from its symptoms and causes to the profound impact that it can have on people's lives.
Right.
And one of the things that really stuck with me from the first part of our conversation is this idea that AVPD can often go unnoticed by others,
Absolutely.
making it even harder for individuals to seek help.
It is.
It's like carrying this invisible burden of fear and self-doubt
Right.
that other people can't see or understand.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important to talk about it
Yeah.
openly and honestly to help break down the stigma and create a more supportive environment for those who are struggling.
I agree.
So let's pick up where we left off and dive into some of the treatment options that have shown promise for AVPD.
Okay.
We talked about several types of therapy in the last part, including CBT, psychodynamic therapy, and schema therapy.
Right.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
Okay.
What are some of the specific techniques that therapists use to help individuals with AVPD?
Well, one of the core techniques used in CBT is cognitive restructuring.
Okay.
It's about identifying and challenging those negative automatic thoughts that fuel avoidance behaviors.
Okay, so for example,
someone with AVPD might have the thought, if I go to that party, everyone will think I'm boring.
right.
A therapist would help them examine that thought, look for evidence to support or refute it, and then develop more balanced and realistic thoughts.
So instead of pretending that the fear doesn't exist, you're learning to kind of reframe those thoughts and give yourself permission to have a different experience.
Exactly. And CBT also focuses on behavioral experiments, which are essentially planned activities designed to help individuals gradually face their fears in a safe and controlled environment.
Okay.
So for someone who avoids social gatherings, a behavioral experiment might involve starting small,
Okay.
like going to a coffee shop with a friend, or attending a low-key event with a supportive family member.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about taking baby steps, building confidence, and proving to yourself that you can handle these situations without the catastrophic outcomes that you fear.
Right. And as they experience success with these smaller challenges, their confidence grows, and they can gradually work their way up to more challenging situations.
So CBT is very much about taking action and challenging those negative thought patterns.
Yeah.
What about psychodynamic therapy?
Right.
How does that approach differ?
Psychodynamic therapy takes a deeper dive into the past, exploring how early experiences and relationships might be shaping current patterns of thinking and behaving.
So it's like connecting the dots between your past and your present.
Right.
Understanding how those early experiences might be influencing your current struggles with AVPD.
Exactly. A psychodynamic therapist might explore your relationship with your parents, any early experiences of rejection or criticism, or any other significant events that might have shaped your sense of self and your beliefs about relationships.
So the goal is to kind of bring those unconscious patterns to the surface so you can start to understand and change them.
Precisely. And through that process of self-discovery, you can start to develop a more secure sense of self, challenge those negative beliefs about yourself, and create healthier patterns of relating to others.
And then there's schema therapy, which we touched on in the last part.
Right.
This fascinating approach that focuses on identifying and changing those deeply ingrained maladaptive schemas that drive our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Yes, and one of the key concepts in schema therapy is limited reparenting, which we talked about earlier. It's this idea that the therapist can provide some of the emotional support and validation that the individual may have missed out on as a child, helping them to heal those early wounds and develop a more secure sense of self.
So it's not about literally replacing the individual's parents.
No.
But it's about providing a corrective emotional experience that can help them rewrite those old negative scripts.
It's about helping them to feel seen, heard, and understood in a way that they may not have experienced before.
Right.
And by experiencing this kind of healthy and nurturing relationship with the therapist, they can start to internalize those positive experiences and develop a more compassionate and accepting relationship with themselves.
And I imagine that can have like a ripple effect on all their other relationships as well.
Absolutely. As they start to heal those early wounds and develop a stronger sense of self-worth, they're more likely to attract healthy and supportive relationships and set boundaries in relationships that aren't serving them.
Okay, so we've talked about 3 different types of therapy that can be helpful for AVPD.
But what about medication?
Okay.
Does that play a role in treatment as well?
Medication isn't typically the first line of treatment for AVPD, but it can be helpful in managing some of the related symptoms, such as anxiety and depression.
Okay.
For example, antidepressants, particularly a class called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, are sometimes prescribed to help reduce anxiety and improve mood.
So it's about addressing the whole person,
Right.
both the underlying psychological issues and the accompanying emotional distress.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that medication isn't a quick fix. It's often used in conjunction with therapy to provide more comprehensive support.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in terms of like professional treatment options.
Yes.
But what about things that individuals can do on their own?
Okay.
To cope with AVPD, are there any self-help strategies that can be helpful?
Absolutely. One of the most important things individuals can do is to practice self-compassion.
AVPD often involves a lot of self-criticism and negative self-talk. So learning to treat yourself with kindness and understanding is crucial.
That makes sense. It's about challenging those harsh inner voices and replacing them with more compassionate and supportive ones.
Right. And there are a number of ways to cultivate self-compassion. You can try practicing mindfulness meditation, which can help you become more aware of your thoughts and feelings without judgment. You can also try journaling, which can be a great way to process your emotions and identify negative thought patterns. And remember to engage in activities that bring you joy and help you feel good about yourself.
So it's about creating a more supportive inner environment for yourself, even if the outside world feels scary or overwhelming.
Exactly. And another helpful strategy is to focus on building your social skills gradually.
Okay.
This might involve starting small, like practicing conversations with friends or family members, or joining a club or group that aligns with your interests.
So it's about taking those baby steps and challenging yourself in ways that feel safe and manageable.
Right. And remember to celebrate your successes, no matter how small they may seem. Every step you take towards facing your fears is a victory.
I love that. It's about acknowledging your progress and recognizing your own strength and resilience.
Exactly. And one last thing I want to emphasize is the importance of building a support system.
Okay.
AVPD can be incredibly isolating, so it's crucial to have people in your life who understand and support you.
So that might involve reaching out to friends, family members,
Yes.
or even joining a support group where you can connect with others who share similar experiences.
Right. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to go through this alone. There are people who care about you and want to support you on your journey.
Okay, so we've talked about various treatment options and self-help strategies, but I think it's important to acknowledge that the journey of healing from AVPD can be challenging and often takes time.
It does.
You know, there will likely be setbacks along the way, but it's important to remember that those setbacks don't define you.
Absolutely. It's about learning from those setbacks, adjusting your approach as needed, and continuing to move forward with compassion and self-acceptance.
And I think that's a powerful message for anyone who's struggling with AVPD. You are worthy of love, connection, and a fulfilling life.
Yes, you are.
And there's help available. Don't give up on yourself.
Beautifully said. And remember, seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of your well-being and making a commitment to yourself to live a richer and more meaningful life.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into avoidant personality disorder.
We have.
We've explored the symptoms, causes, impact, and treatment options, and we've discussed the importance of self-compassion, building social skills, and creating a supportive environment for yourself.
Right.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll wrap up our discussion by exploring some of the emerging research on AVPD and discussing what the future might hold for understanding and treating this condition.
Sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive on avoidant personality disorder. We've been exploring this complex condition.
Right.
And in this final part, we'll touch on some emerging research and look ahead at some potential new avenues for understanding and treating AVPD.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see how research is constantly evolving and offering, new insights and potential breakthroughs.
I was reading about some really interesting findings related to the brain and AVPD.
Oh, okay.
The research suggests that there might be differences in brain activity in people with this disorder, particularly in areas that are associated with processing emotions and social cues.
Right. Some studies have shown heightened activity in the amygdala,
Yeah,
which is the part of the brain that's responsible for processing fear and anxiety.
right.
When people with AVPD are exposed to social situations or even just think about them.
So it's like their brains are wired to perceive those interactions as more threatening
Right.
than they actually are,
Exactly.
which makes sense given their intense fear of rejection and criticism.
And there's also some evidence suggesting that people with AVPD might have less activity in the prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
which is the part of the brain that's involved in regulating emotions and making decisions.
So they might have a harder time kind of controlling their anxiety and making rational decisions in those social situations.
Right.
Because the prefrontal cortex isn't as effective at calming down that overactive amygdala.
Precisely. And this understanding of the neurobiology of AVPD can be really helpful in developing more targeted treatment approaches.
Yeah.
For example, there's growing interest in using neurofeedback therapy,
Oh, okay.
which trains individuals to regulate their brain activity
Uh-huh.
to help people with ADPD manage their anxiety and improve their social functioning.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like giving them the tools to kind of rewire their brains and break free from those ingrained patterns of fear and avoidance.
Exactly. And there's also research exploring the potential of virtual reality therapy,
Oh, wow.
where individuals can practice social interactions in a safe and controlled virtual environment.
Wow. So they can gradually expose themselves to the things that trigger their anxiety,
Yes.
but without the real world consequences of, potential rejection or criticism.
Right. And the great thing about virtual reality is that it allows for a lot of customization.
Okay.
Therapists can tailor the virtual environment to the individual's specific needs and gradually increase the level of difficulty as they progress.
It's like a personalized training ground for social skills.
Exactly.
And speaking of personalized treatments, I know there's also a lot of interest in developing more tailored approaches to therapy in general,
Right.
based on an individual's unique needs and experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a growing recognition that one-size-fits-all approaches to therapy aren't always effective.
Right.
It's about understanding the individual's specific triggers, thought patterns, and coping mechanisms, and then developing a treatment plan that addresses those specific needs.
So moving away from that cookie cutter approach to therapy
Right.
and recognizing that everybody's journey with this is unique.
Exactly. And this movement towards personalized therapy is really exciting because it holds the potential to improve treatment outcomes and help more people find lasting relief from AVPD.
Yeah, it's about empowering individuals to take ownership of their healing journey and work collaboratively with their therapist to create a path that feels right for them.
Precisely. And I think that's a powerful message of hope for anyone who's struggling with AVPD.
Yeah.
With the right support, understanding and commitment to self-care recovery is possible.
And as research continues to kind of shed light on the complexities of this disorder, I think we can expect to see even more innovative and effective treatment options emerge in the future.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting time to be in the field of mental health, and I'm very optimistic about the future of AVPD treatment.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive on avoidant personality disorder. We've explored the symptoms, causes, impact, and treatment options.
Yeah.
And we've touched on some of the latest research and emerging therapeutic approaches. But as we wrap up, I kind of want to circle back to something we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The importance of empathy.
That's such a crucial point.
Because ultimately, understanding AVPD is about understanding the human experience of fear,
Yeah.
shame, and the longing for connection.
It is.
It's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of their struggles, deserves to be treated with compassion and respect.
Beautifully said. And if you take away just one thing from our deep dive today,
Yeah.
let it be this. If you're struggling with AVPD, you are not alone.
Yeah.
There's help available, and you deserve to live a full and meaningful life.
Absolutely.
And if you know someone who might be struggling, reach out, offer support, and encourage them to seek professional help.
Right.
Together, we can create a more compassionate and understanding world for those living with AVPD.
On that note of hope and support, we'll wrap up our deep dive into avoidant personality disorder.
Okay,
We hope you found this exploration insightful and informative.
I did.
Remember to stay curious, keep learning, and be kind to yourself and others.
Say it.
This.
Until next time, take care